the future, because actually I think I've got about 5 more minutes.
It's 5 minutes.
It's ridiculous. Okay, 5 more minutes in which I want you to talk about what you're next going to do, which is
Yes,
completely different.
it is. I know, I feel a bit like Monty Python. It's always completely different. not very like Monty Python. It's completely different because, as I said, the book always has to be a coup de foudre. And I've got a dear friend called Gedroits, whose sister Mel, you probably know, is a wonderful actress and comedian. And Miko is unquenchably enthusiastic about having ideas about people I should write about. And never a week has gone past, well, never a month or a year has gone past without Miko saying, I've got it, this is the right one for you. And so, say 4 years ago, Miko and his family were going to come and stay for Christmas at this lovely house in the country. Miko on the doorstep says, Miranda, I've got a wonderful idea. And I said, Miko, you're not even through the door yet? And he looked very crestfallen. He said, it really is a good idea. And so I took pity and I said, all right, let's sit down. You can tell me the story. I'll give you 5 minutes. And because he knew I'm usually very rude about them. And he sat down and he told me about his kinswoman, Princess Vera Gedroits, whose family came from Lithuania and who went out to Russia. And he told me the story, and at the end of 5 minutes, he said, you haven't stopped me yet. And I said, and I promise you this is true, I said, no, because I'm going to write it. Because it is that fast. And I just knew that this was absolutely a woman I wanted to write about. She sounded everything I like. She was completely unknown. She'd been cancelled. She had been, among many other things, the first ever woman professor of surgery in the world. There wasn't another in the world for 60 years after her. An Englishwoman, Avril Mansfield, in 1993. Vera became a professor of surgery in 1930. A month after she became professor, she was by that time living in Kiev. This is just a little bit of her life. She was living with another woman, Countess Miranda. She was a princess and a countess. This is Stalin's Russia, but she got away with it. She got away with those things. But at that point, Stalin was about to embark on, he had already embarked upon his, I think one can't call it anything much less than a genocide in Ukraine. And part of the policy was to get rid of all the intellectuals. How do you get rid of the intellectuals? Well, you won't kill them, that's the easiest thing. So most of them just died. Vera got removed from her job. She was no longer a professor. She was thrown out of her house and she ended up living on the edge of Kiev in a little room there. And she was cancelled. But what I love, and I've just discovered this about Vera, is that just before she died, she wrote a wonderful children's book. You couldn't write anything against the state by then, but you could deviously do it by doing it another way. She wrote her memoirs as a critique of Stalin. They're brilliant memoirs, which are now translated a bit by me, mostly by other people. One day they'll be published here. But her very last book was called The Adventures of Gul. And on the cover, it's got a wonderful picture of a rather frisky-looking wolfhound with his ears sticking up, and a chain around his neck which is broken. And the story is a children's story about the dog who broke out of the orphanage and went to do what he wanted in the world and be free. And it's sort of Vera saying something very rude to the state of Russia, and I love her for that. That's just before she died.
How far are you? When can we read it?
That's an easy one.
Okay, well.
It's published in May.
Oh,
They brought it forward. It was going to be published next autumn, but I think well, we all know what publishers are like. They're always looking for their moment. And I think at the moment they don't know what's going on in Ukraine, so they decided they would bring it forward just in case things got resolved and Ukraine went off the map of interest. So I've been working incredibly hard for the last 3 months, and I think it's going to be a really interesting book. I've loved writing it, and I'll love seeing what people think of it.
Well, we have about 7 minutes. If anybody wants to ask, challenge, not challenge.
Do you speak Russian?
I can read a bit of Russian, but I can't. I mean, if I spoke it, you would howl with laughter, so I won't. But I can read it just well enough to get through a document. I can't do handwriting, but I can do a text with difficulty.
Did you do that from a standing start, or did you know before you started?
No, I didn't. But I mean, when I did the book about England and Germany, I had to learn to read German. Again, my spoken German is hideous, but I can sort of read my way through the pages. This is not to say I am fluent, it's with great difficulty, but I can do enough for a biography.
Can I ask a very quick question, Miranda, about Russia and Ukraine, because you obviously haven't been able to go. So how have you filled in the placing?
I've been incredibly fortunate, as I often am, and I think it's partly another tip I will give to anybody who needs any tips, none of you do, about biography, is talk. Do not be all like that and keep it to yourself. Talk to everybody. I have a passion for thrift shops or vintage shops or whatever. Whenever I go into them, I'm always chatting about whatever. I've been given more tips and knowledge that way than any other. And so because I talk to everybody, I tend to meet people who know Russia very well, and I've got to make some wonderful friends. One friend's writing a book about riding across Russia at the moment, and I told them my problem, and they just have, I'd say, tell me about Bryansk, or tell me about this place or that, and then they describe them to me, and I just sit and listen, and that's pretty much how I've done it, and looked at pictures a lot, of course.